Kia ora te whānau, ihu karaiti ko Andrew Doubleday aho. Today we're looking at the Gospel for Sunday the 23rd of June 2024, and it's Mark chapter 4 verses 35 to 41. It's Mark's account of a very well-known miracle, one of the stories about Jesus. So reading from verse 35. On that day, when evening had come, Jesus said to them, "Let's go across to the other side." And leaving the crowd behind, they took him with them in the boat, just as he was. Other boats were with him. A great windstorm arose, and the waves beat into the boat, so that the boat was already being swamped. But he was in the stern, asleep on a cushion. And they woke him up and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" He woke up and rebuked the wind, and said to the sea, "Peace, be still." Then the wind ceased, and there was a dead calm. He said to them, "Why are you afraid? Have you still no faith?" And they were filled with great awe, and said to one another, "Who is this, that even the winds and the sea obey him?" So, can you picture the disciples on the lake? Jesus has wanted to cross to the other side. And so they took him along, just as he was. And it kind of gives a sense of there was nothing extra. There was no extra baggage. He was tired and ordinary. There's almost a sense as I sit with those words of Jesus appearing to be diminished in some way. Perhaps there's just nothing left in the tank. Jesus is dog tired, just like we get from time to time. And we next see him asleep in the stern of the boat on a cushion, perhaps even quietly snoring. Well, a storm comes up. Now, half of the disciples are seasoned fishermen, so this wasn't a problem. Until it was. There were other boats accompanying them. Do we know what happened to them? We're not told. My hunch is that they just quietly would have returned to shore. But the disciples press on because Jesus has told them he wants to go to the other side, and they know what they're doing until they don't. It's just a storm, and they've been through lots of storms before, many like it, until they haven't been in quite one like this. And it's not long before they realize that this is beyond them, and they wake Jesus up. It seems that their expectations of him are low. All they're concerned about are their own skins. Are they concerned about Jesus? Well, not so much. It's almost as if they blame him for their predicament. After all, it's he who wanted to cross the lake. This must be his fault, and with any prescience at all on his part, surely this could all have been avoided. But what happens next is totally shocking. Jesus simply gets up and commands the storm to stop. And it does. From a turbulent washing machine kind of stirred upness, there's suddenly a dead calm. Now the disciples are either really scared, they're really scared of Jesus, or there's something else which we'll come to in a minute. Because they've seen Jesus revealed as never before. Here is Jesus, just like that, has extinguished a storm, a horrendous storm. Now, creating a storm is one thing. Stopping it with a word, just like that, is surely something else. It's a wee bit like that old saying that it takes a strong man to lift a piano, an even stronger one to put it down gently. So they're either terrified of Jesus or they're totally awestruck. The words that are used here can mean either or both. If we read it literally, they could read, and they feared with a great fear, or they were overwhelmed by awe. So which was it? Kind of imagine it could have been both. Might have been different for different disciples. Of course, we'd imagine that if it was us, it would be the latter. We would be the awestruck ones. Look at that! Isn't that amazing? Isn't he amazing? And for some of the disciples, that may have been true. But for others, maybe they'd have been a bit like Peter, who had earlier on let Jesus use his boat as a pulpit for a day, while the crowds listened from the shore. And at the end of the day, Jesus instructs Peter to put the boat a little bit out and to let down the nets and pull them back up, and they're full of fish. This is a reward for the hireage of the boat. And Peter's response is not, "Wow, isn't he amazing?" It's, "Oh Lord, please leave me. I'm such a sinful man." Where words that are used here might be ambiguous, could be fear, terror, or awe. Both meanings could be true. It's risky to claim with certainty which category we'd fit into. My experience of life tells me that one of the most dangerous things we could ever say was, "I'd never do that." Again, we have Peter's example in denying Jesus. "I'd never do that." And he does. Because the reality is that sure as eggs, we claim there's something we would never do, could never do, we're going to be tested on it. And often in a fairly short order. It's good to retain a little bit of humility about such things, because we don't know how we're going to react, how we're going to respond, until we're really tested. Now Jesus, he references the affair at the storm. And here's the issue. The word here he uses here doesn't speak of fear in the sense that we've been talking about. It's quite a different word. It speaks of their cowardice, of their timidity. It's the same word we find in 2 Timothy 1 and 7. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, of timidity, of cowardice, but a spirit of power, of can-do, a spirit of love, and a spirit of self-control, self-discipline, of soundness of heart and mind. I pray this for myself every day. Pray for the grace of this gift that Paul is saying is the birthright of all of us. But Jesus recognizes their lack of confidence. He recognizes in them their fear of death, because that's what this is ultimately about. In the face of death, they're found wanting. The story is told of John Wesley as he's sailing across to America and encounters a terrible storm, and he's beside himself with anxiety. But on the ship there's a company of Moravian Christians, and he noticed they just gather together. There is such a calmness, there is such a serenity, there is such a quiet confidence that whatever happens, their lives are held secure in God's hand. And as he looks at them, he wanted what they had. A confidence that death is not the worst that could happen, but that in fact it was ultimately a doorway to glory. We don't tend to think like that today, do we? Not most of us. And neither did Jesus' disciples. In my previous role, I used to fly quite a bit. I confess to having been initially a fairly nervous flyer. I didn't like it. It's unnatural. Travelling at 30,000 feet, where it's minus 50 degrees centigrade outside. We're in a flying tin can. And if anything goes wrong, well, you know that your chances aren't great. And of course, there are times when you'd experience turbulence. And I remember one day, as I was preparing to fly, the weather forecast was for extreme winds near Auckland. And I thought, oh, crumbs, I'm not looking forward to this. And I realised as I was praying about this before I left for the airport, Andrew, you've got two choices. You know, if in the end the worst that could happen looks like it's happening, you can do one of two things. You can panic, or you can trust. Choose to trust. Because in fact, panicking isn't going to help you or anybody else around you. Choose to know that your life now and into eternity is held securely within the grasp of Jesus, and you can trust him. Yeah. Does it work? Well, it can do. I want to suggest that if the disciples had been calm in the face of the storm, that their response to Jesus wouldn't have been described with the word that's used as either terror or awe. It would have been more like acceptance, perhaps, appreciation, perhaps even joy. And there might have been a kind of subtext as they were elbowing one another. We knew you'd do that, and it was fun to watch. Jesus is in the end telling them and telling us that they can have confidence in him, not in themselves, but in him. And while he's with them, nothing is going to happen without his permission. And ultimately, either way, whatever happens, even if the worst happens, it's all going to be okay. Amen. God bless you.